In today's video, I'm going to be sharing my response to the hashtag occult tea. So grab yourself a cup of whatever it is you want to drink, settle back, relax, and enjoy. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you for joining me for today's video. Today I haven't got tea, I've got water. And the reason is I am not very well at the moment. So I know last few videos I keep saying I'm just not very well, and I have been having a number of health issues and challenges come up for me, and every week it's kind of something different, but it's like repeating things and they keep coming, and it's just water for me today because it's just better for my digestive system. But I'm excited to share my VR to the hashtag occult tea, and this hashtag was started by Joanna at Polish Folk Witch. I believe it was an Instagram post that Joanna created, in turn inspired Ella Harrison, Leah the Red-Headed Witch, and Joanna to all collaborate together to create this hashtag. So I will link everyone's video below. This is a few weeks old now. Hopefully I'll be posting this soon, but I do tend to batch film and then I have editing time, etc. And there are a few other videos that I filmed quite a while ago now that I still haven't gone live. So when those go live, you might notice the time differences, but I wanted to respond anyway in a timely way to this, so hopefully this will be the next video. It's a really interesting tag, and I think, yeah, definitely these topics are so important to discuss within our communities. There have definitely been these topics going around in the tarot community and in the witchcraft community for a while, at least since I've been engaging and creating content anyway. So I think it's really, really interesting, really useful to come back to. So I've really enjoyed watching everyone's videos. I've seen quite a lot, listening like when I'm pottering and stuff, and it's been good to hear everyone's feedback and thoughts, to get a picture of where we all feel we are within the community and how our impression is of the community as well. I do think that sharing honestly and authentically is really, really important for communities to come together and to build stronger and to, yeah, improve on how we're working together, etc. I've really appreciated listening to opinions as well that I don't necessarily feel are true for myself, but that I also can see and respect. Also, I think it's really important, and I think that a couple of people touched on this, that listening to the opinions of other people that are different to yours is like really important, because otherwise we're just surrounding ourselves with an echo chamber. And I think that listening to diverse voices and respecting those voices and understanding where those people are coming from is really, really key and important as well. I do have some thoughts that have come up, and some that I haven't heard anyone yet say, and some that I will be referencing from other people's videos as well. The usual disclaimer really that, you know, I am just one human. I'm experiencing life from one lens, and I am very, very grateful for the privilege of being able to listen to and understand other people's perspectives as well, even if they might be different to mine, especially if they are different to mine. So I'm really grateful for this tag. Thank you to the creators, and I'll just get right on in without any further ado. Kind of editing Emily here, I wanted to say at the start of the video, because this was going to be one of the things that I wanted to bring to this hashtag, that I do feel that a lot of these prompts come into shadow work or touch on areas where people need to do their shadow work. I think that a lot of the drama or upset comes up within spaces when people maybe don't understand each other, misunderstand each other, misinterpret, don't like someone else because it triggers something else in them. I think there's a lot of that in humanity anyway, and I think when you get people coming together who have a shared interest and ideas about the ways that they like to do things, and then someone else comes along and does things a slightly different way, I think naturally there's a human response to that I don't think is a bad thing. Like, we all have shadows, it's okay, it's all good. So like, I have a lot of shadow work to do, and I'm owning that. Basically, you know, I'm doing that. I'm very happy to call myself out during this video for a number of things that I think I am triggered by within that pertain to this hashtag, and things that, you know, like I do need to continue to do my work around, and I'm doing that. I'm very honest about that. I talk about that sometimes on my channel. I will do that, but I will also say shadow work, shadow work, shadow work is king. And at the end I talk about kindness as well, and respect, and I think kindness and mutual respect so important. And just having an attitude of, to be honest, a lot of people do have this, like the attitude of, I do generally trust people. That usually has been okay for me. I have been burnt by friends and things, but I have no reason to doubt someone for their practice or anything unless they genuinely are shady. You know, if they're rocking up in my DMs like, oh, your ancestors came to me, I have a message from your ancestors, you know what I mean? Obviously. So, but I do think it's so important for me to do my shadow work, and there are a number of things I'm gonna mention for myself that come up
for me to do with, you know, wanting to be liked, because I am a people pleaser. I have been raised to be a people pleaser, and that was a natural thing in me and working on those things. So I just want to say that, like, I feel like it's really important for us to own and be responsible for our own energy and how we show up, how we move through the world, and what we're projecting onto others, because a lot of the stuff that can upset others and upset us generally is usually to do with shadows that are unchecked or things that are triggering other traumas and things. And so it doesn't make anyone bad for having that. Like, we all have that, and you know, I definitely have that. I just want to say that as well. Like, I think that community spaces would be a lot better if everybody did do their shadow work. And I know a lot of people that I talk to and that a lot of people whose videos I follow do, but there are probably a lot of people out there who don't, and I think it would help. It would help them, I think, if they did. You know, I'm not thinking of anyone, I don't know of anyone particularly, but I think that doing shadow work and doing that inner work where you know who you are, where you work on yourself and you understand what your limitations are, what your ethics are, what your morals are, what your weaknesses are, where your shadows are. I know what some of mine are. I don't know all of them though, and the shadow work doesn't end. Just because I'm sitting here talking about shadow work doesn't put me on some kind of moral high ground either. Like, I'm not. As I will say in the video too, like, I very much feel like I am always a student. I'm always a student, I'm always learning. I don't think I'd feel comfortable even claiming the title of expert at anything. You know, I could have knowledge of something, I could have experienced knowledge of something and practiced knowledge of something for many years, but the idea of expert for me isn't. But yeah, that comes into some of the things that I'm going to discuss. So I will just say shadow work, shadow work, shadow work, inner work, know thyself, which know thyself, and I will say kindness, 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 and mutual respect. That's probably my takeaway if you remember anything from this video. But yeah, I'm going to get into it now. Mwah.
So the first section is to introduce yourself. So how long have you been participating in the online witchcraft space? What practices and topics do you discuss primarily? So I can't remember when I first made my channel. I think it was either the end of 2019. I think it was the end of 2019. But I was participating in the YouTube community's witchy tarot sphere for a couple of years before that. Before that, I wasn't really aware that there was like a community of witches on YouTube. So I didn't really spend any time on YouTube, to be honest with you, and I don't think I really had Instagram until that point either. I think like I had an Instagram and just shared personal photos, really, I think. And I've had Pinterest before that because I worked in fashion for a long time, so I'd pin that kind of thing. But in terms of my own practice, I was 10 or 11 when I first saw Practical Magic and then The Craft, you know, sleepovers as you do when you're a youngster, and I was kind of like, oh my gosh, this is actually a thing, because I'd always felt like a witch as a child. I felt that enchantment in my life, you know, and I believed in magic. I thought magic was real, but I reached that sort of age, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9, when you sort of realize that people are saying like, Santa Claus doesn't exist, the tooth fairy isn't real, and you're just like, okay, so I understand that Santa doesn't exist, an actual guy in a red suit who comes down my chimney, but I do believe in a spirit of Christmas, and I always believed in that because I felt that experience of it. Not that I felt a ghost of Christmas or anything like that, I'm not saying that, but like I always believed in spirits because when I was in liminal spaces, particularly like by the seaside, in woodlands, out in nature really primarily, like I would feel the presence of those and I would commune with them, but like not how I would now. It's very different because I was a child, but like that was an experience for me. Then coming into that space where I realized that it was actually a thing was so exciting. So I sort of threw myself into whatever I could find, and I was very lucky that the town that I grew up in was kind of known in England for being witchy. Not like one of the most famous places, so it won't be probably any of the places you've heard of if you don't live in England, but it was considered to be quite a witchy place, and there were always witchy shops in the town, and it was a small town as well. I think at one point there were even 3 shops at one time, and there was one shop that was there the longest time, and it was so cool. I loved that shop, but it always had like the same books. So it had Scott Cunningham books, it had Silver Ravenwolf, and it had the first author I read, which was Fiona Horn. And so like that was my entrance. So my mum wouldn't call herself a witch or anything, but she has always done like aromatherapy. She's always practiced like yoga and meditation, and so she introduced me to meditation when I was maybe 8 because I was having panic attacks and worried about school stuff, and so I was doing these meditations. She had these cassette tapes, so I did those. Also because I was involved in a lot of drama, like I acted and sang and danced and stuff, and so in a lot of like drama classes, you know, I did that up until like I actually almost went to drama school. I got into a few drama schools, but I didn't go. I went to uni instead. But so in the the theatre space, a lot of the exercises that I came to read about in what was, you know, synonymous Wicca with witchcraft in those sort of formative years were really similar to what I'd already been practicing and learning in those theatre spaces as well. So it's like energy work, visualization techniques. So they came really naturally to me because I think of the imagination and the play that I had as a child, but then also because of the things that I enjoyed doing, like arts and theatre and dance and things. So I think that those practices are something that we don't hear all that much about, but are so important. And people like Laura Tempest-Zakroff obviously has a dance practice that's a really big part of her life, and Kellyanne Maddox shares about theatre and drama and things like that. And so when we get into that area, it's one of the reasons why I love Chaos Magick and Clive Barker, and where magic and theatre kind of blur lines. I'm interested in that. But I've just been rabbiting on. I've just massively gone off on a tangent, but this is where it started. But when I was a teenager, we had no social media. When we did get it, it was like Angel Fire websites is what I remember, and they were like really brightly coloured pages with dancing images, and there would be lots of spells on there. And I remember there were rituals that I'd copy and paste and print off, or however it worked then. I think we had a PC, but before that we had a computer that I play Lemmings on. It's like a trip down memory lane. Anyway, I think that people now have so much more choice. I literally filmed a video a number of weeks ago, and it's not live yet, but I was talking about this in that video, and it's literally just wild, because I actually think that the amount of content there is, it makes it harder for people these days coming to it. And so I'm actually really grateful for that. But at the same time, it still impacts me now. And so I guess we'll get into the ways in which it impacts me now. And I think that like it is hard. I work in social media, so switching off my phone is really important. I have timers on my apps so that it just times out. I often have to just put my passcode in to go back in so I can do work. You know, it times me out so quick. But it's an extra step that you have to take. And so for like self-care and like mental health, it's been really, really key. But like I do think that coming to the witchcraft space now with a social media area, it must be confusing for beginners, I think, as well as inspiring, of course. But there are some like really wonderful things that come out of it, but then also some things that I think could be confusing or maybe distracting. So if someone is working on honing a particular ability, say visualization or psychic development or something like that, and they're really busy on that, but then they see something else and they're like, oh, and they follow that down the rabbit hole, and it could get intense in that way. And so potentially there's more of a chance for like overload maybe and overwhelm, and I definitely have felt overwhelm in online spaces. So, but there's a lot to get into, and I'm really definitely going to be rabbiting in this video. What practices and topics do you discuss primarily? So I talk about witchcraft and tarot on my channel. I would call myself a folk witch because of the kinds of witchcraft that I engage with, but there is a lot that comes into my practice, and a lot of it is not transferable to camera. So a lot of actually what I do isn't really shared at all. And that's because it's like energetic work and things like astral work, dream work, that kind of thing, shadow work. You can't really transfer that to a video unless you're just talking about how to do those things, or like how you might learn about those things. You know, you can't actually share that. So
I also don't tend to actually actively share any spell work or ritual work or practices that I'm doing in the moment, and I don't share a lot of what I'm doing generally anyway. And if I do choose to share anything, it is usually only in the future when it's done.
Like a lot of my actual practice isn't shared online at all. My practice is quite broad. I'm interested in a lot of things, but there are also some things that I know aren't really my thing. Like I appreciate things like numerology. I think there's a lot of value to it. I think there's power to it. I know a little bit about it, but I don't have any books, I don't think, specifically on numerology, and it's not something I'm like, oh, I must get into this. But stuff like tarot, obviously, astrology, Reiki, psychic development, astral travel, herbalism, folk magic, traditional witchcraft, those are areas that I have developed in. So I do know where I am and what is my practice, and I think if you have a browse on my channel, you'll be able to see what I talk about. What's my personal reasoning, inspiration behind sharing my practice online? The reason I came to YouTube, I think, was through the rabbit hole of the Google search and the interwebs, trying to find whatever it was that I was searching for. Maybe it was a book or something, and then finding a YouTube video and being intrigued. And it was I think, witchcraft content that then led me to find tarot content. And then I got so intrigued by all of the different decks that I hadn't really seen before. Once you open that, you realize there's so much more than just the Smith-Waite. It gets really exciting, and then you, yeah, go down that tarot journey. I joined really to build community, and like, not my own community, but I joined to create connection, to have connections, to meet people, and to make friends, really. I mean, I didn't think I'd create the friends that I have out of this, so I'm overjoyed with the close friendships and bonds that I have with a very small amount of people. But I do have a little community of people that I have met through creating a channel and through being in this online community space that is now completely separate to the online space as well. So it's really beautiful in that way that it creates this space where you can meet such like-minded, beautiful people who actually feel like soulmates. For me, it was about connection. I think I definitely got that and more. And it's also lovely to just have those connections with people online, and even the people I've not met face to face. I really value being able to share thoughts and opinions and get feedback on things, you know, just have conversations, like in-depth conversations that are like really, really valuable. And that's amazing. I do have some in real life connections and communities as well, which are so valuable, and I guess we'll get into that. I just go rambling off and I'm getting ahead of myself. But do I seek to educate, learn, or connect? I mean, connection was my first one, and then I think I wanted to share more and more, and it was more like experiential that I wanted to share. And then I guess there are some educational topics on my channel, but I definitely come at it from an experiential lens. I don't say this is the one and only way, it's just this is what my experience is. I share that, and maybe it is educational for some people and maybe it's interesting to others, but it might not be something they want to take on for themselves, and that's absolutely fine. But it just is a place to share, really, and I think it's become a little bit more educational in terms of sharing experiential things. But connection was my main reasoning, and it still is, to be honest. Learning, yes, I mean, I think I never thought I would learn some of the things that I have learned on here. I definitely learned more about ceremonial style of magic, such as the Lesser Key of Solomon, the Greater Key of Solomon and stuff, and listening to podcasts like What Magic Is This?, Foolish Fish, Glitch Bottle,
and Rune Soup as well.
Podcasts like that. I probably wouldn't have heard of Josephine McCarthy, for instance. I wouldn't have delved down some of the rabbit holes I've delved down. I think that it's been interesting in that way, because learning about more occult ceremonial traditions and approaches has actually been like, oh, quite a mirror, because you're like, okay, that's a much more kind of ritualistic way and almost formal way of coming at this particular whatever it may be, but it echoes what I learned and some of the practices that I do. And I can see that, I can appreciate that, and some of those things have definitely influenced my practice, so that's been wonderful. I think you learn a lot from listening to other practitioners. So there is a wave at the moment, which I think is beautiful, of practitioners sharing their personal gnosis, and some people are really leaning into this, and I love it, because I think it is, as long as obviously they state that it's personal gnosis, then there's so much wisdom to be shared, because you can actually strengthen your own understanding of things, especially if you've experienced something slightly similar, or similar but slightly nuanced differences, or something happening at a similar time as someone else, and if you're chatting with them you get that and you're like, whoa, that's synchronicity, like what's going on in the collective, and you can feel it. There's ripples that you can feel, and that comes through knowing a diverse amount of people within a community. Even if you're not like best friends with them, even if you don't see them face to face, you gather a picture of some of the energy movements within the collective by having these connections, and that's beautiful. So how do I believe social media as a whole has impacted the community? I think that is just like opening a can of worms if I'm to talk about it, because I think it's probably enhanced some amazing things, and it's also enhanced and highlighted some less amazing things about community, about communities in general. And so like a witchcraft community or an occult community is going to be the same in the way that it has all types of people within it. I think that I definitely felt like this coming to the craft, feeling this naive, like, oh, if they're a witch then they're going to be really friendly and they're going to be kind and they're going to be good people. That's not necessarily true, because there are really toxic, unpleasant, nasty people in every area of life. It just is a fact. And Thorn Mooney spoke to this this really well in her video. The issues that are highlighted and come about through social media, I think were there before. It's just that now it's a different kind of medium and it highlights things differently, and I think that maybe there's more awareness around some of the things that happen as well. So maybe before the internet, something was going on in a different witchcraft community or a different spiritual community that you're not part of, you wouldn't necessarily be aware of, or you might hear about through the grapevine. You might not necessarily hear about it, but with online spaces, I think that stuff spreads. I've heard a number of people talk about this within their VRs, and that is the short form content. I do think, I would agree, it probably has been damaging to the way in which we perceive and engage with content online that is to do with witchcraft and spirituality, magic, etc., esoteric topics, and it does impact on your attention span, etc. I think that it depends what you want to get out of a platform. Probably TikTok is not the best, but then again, I don't know if I can speak to that really well because I've never really engaged that much with TikTok content at all. A couple of things that I have seen I don't really particularly like. I don't particularly like the dance trends and other dangerous trends that go around on there. The only thing I think that potentially when I get linked to TikTok these days, it's like a recipe. I always got frustrated with it because I could never do whatever it was I was talking about any justice anyway, so it just felt a bit of a waste of time. Instagram I like, but I think it's changed as well with the emphasis on video content. I think I do prefer things like Pinterest, feel really nice, and YouTube as well is lovely because it's more long form and people can explain a little bit more about their practices and their work, and you can find such lovely things like recipes and art content. I watch a lot of fan content around scary movies and stuff. I really enjoy that kind of content. I watch fashion content, beauty content, you know, these things I really enjoy watching, and of course I watch videos from the tarot community and the witchcraft community as well. I do think as someone who creates content, I feel it's important for me to engage with other people's content as well, so I do that, but I don't have a problem if other people don't want to watch me. I am nearly 40. For a lot of my life, I haven't felt like I belonged. I've been bullied a lot through my life. I've experienced a lot of heartbreak and pain with female friendships and connections. I definitely have gotten much better at shielding myself, protecting myself, and I know that some people just don't like me. Some people have bullied me and then come to me years later and apologized and told me why that was. Some people have been very, very honest and told me that they were jealous of me for a particular reason. It has happened for a long time in my life, and you know, I just can only be responsible for myself, and I recognize that some other people might not want to watch me, and if they don't, that's absolutely fine. Like, it's all good. I just want to share what I share and be good in what I'm doing. Do you know what I mean? Like, be as good as I can be in what I'm doing, and to just spread as much, like, I know it sounds cheesy, but peace and joy and love. That's all I really want to do. I ask people to correct me if I say anything that is offensive that I don't understand about, because I don't necessarily have that perspective on things. You know, I'm very privileged, white cis woman, and so if there's a certain phrase or way of saying something that I'm not aware of because I don't have that experience of life that would enable me to already have been aware of that other than what I already do know, and someone tells me that, I'm more than happy to correct myself and to say, really sorry, like I wasn't aware of that, thank you so much for correcting me, because now I will know, and when you know better, you do better, and I think that's really important. You know, I really feel that that's the case for me, but at the same time, I'm not going to apologise for who I am, because I've spent such a lot of my life doing that. If somebody doesn't like me, I'm more than happy for them to go and watch somebody else. That's fine by me too. That's how I feel. I just don't want to spread any hate or discord or anything like that. I definitely went off on a tangent with that one too. How do I think social media platforms such as TikTok, Instagram, okay, yeah. So I think that YouTube definitely is better for education and information sharing than any of the other platforms. Pinterest, I think, is best for like a feel-good kind of thing. Instagram, I think, for like sharing with friends really, and for seeing books that people are reading, or I like to put short tarot flip throughs on there. It's a nice short form content, like a tarot deck that's new to me, and I like using it that way. Rochelle, Amethyst Ascension, listened to their response today, and they said it brilliantly that it is actually a service to do a full walkthrough of a tarot deck, and everyone needs to see walkthroughs of tarot decks if they are thinking about picking up a tarot deck. And I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, nail on the head, because it is a service. So, you know, if it works for the content creator and and they enjoy it and people are enjoying it, then I think that's great. That's ideal. I think that each to their own, and I think that it's really important for people to take responsibility for what they create, what they put out, and also what they're consuming, because nobody else can do that for them. Is consuming witchcraft content becoming a substitute for practice? So again, with this, I can only speak for myself, and I would say categorically no. That has never been the case, because I listen to YouTube content more than I watch it. Occasionally, I'll put it on the TV if, say, my hubby's gone out for an evening and I've got the TV to myself, or sometimes if I'm doing some like mobility exercises on the floor for my back or something, because I've had a really bad back, I might have YouTube on the TV and I might watch a video that way. But my favourite way of consuming it is either on my phone or on my laptop when I'm cooking or cleaning, pottering around the house. So that is when I consume it, so I don't ever get distracted by watching YouTube content when I would be practicing anyway, and I would always prioritize my practice over consuming the content. I think the only exception is if I'm really burnt out and I'm experiencing times of like actual burnout, and that when my practice is reduced right down to just breath work and candle gazing and I'm in bed, say, or when I've had like bouts of illness or whatever, like, and you don't have the energy to like do any spell work or ritual work or craft oils or create art or anything like that, or go for a long walk and meditate by a tree. You don't have the energy or spoons for that because you're in bed, but you might do some meditation in silence, you might do some reading, but then your brain might hurt, so you might say, okay, well, to turn on a YouTube video and listen to an interview by a creator and someone who's just brought out a book that I'm interested in purchasing. That's really important kind of research, because I want to go ahead and read that book. So but it's either at a time, like I said, when I'm pottering and doing other things, or it's at a time like if I'm burnt out and my practices for the next few days going to be just slower. Currently, as far as I know, I don't have any chronic issues. I've been having like a few bouts of acute things that will come and go. I had an accident a couple of years ago at the end of 2022. I had an accident, had COVID, and it's things like that, you know. So I don't want anyone to think that I'm like really ill or anything. So on that note as well about consuming witchcraft content as a substitute, I would not know at all about anybody else. And it's really, I don't think, my place to say. I mean, potentially social media makes more room for that, but at the same time, I think if someone wants to be like a scholar of witchcraft or the occult and they read books but they don't practice, that's kind of similar. But also that's perfectly legitimate in my mind. If they want to do that, then they can do that. But for me, it's a no.
One thing I've noticed about is people always form opinions if somebody has practice. I think it's natural to do that, but then you check yourself. Like I said, I check myself if things come up for me. But at the end of the day, no one will know what someone else is doing, because there are a lot of aspects to someone's practice. And like I said, a lot of it doesn't translate. So no one knows what is happening behind closed doors. No one knows about someone else's practice. And I like that. I like that my practice is mine and it's a treasure for me. So I really, really like that part of it. But yeah, it's also nice to be witnessed in the way that you can connect with people who have a similar path, even if their path is slightly different. I like that a lot. I like being able to talk to people who have different opinions and different perspectives and different practices and different paths. I think that's beautiful.
Influencer authenticity. Out of what I share on social media, how much of it is stage versus reality? So I think Heather made a really brilliant point about there being a lot of conflation in our minds as humans between authenticity and the amount that we expose ourselves, or like the amount that we allow ourselves to be shared. And I think it's really, really important to consider that, because as human beings, we are complex, nuanced beings, and there are a number of layers to my personality that many people who've known me for 10 years wouldn't necessarily know unless they're like my husband or my best friend or my child. Do you know what I mean? I mean, my children aren't 10, but everybody has inner worlds, and that doesn't mean that they're inauthentic in the way that they present, but they might have a different way that they filter their personality and persona depending on who the audience is. If it's an audience of some like-minded souls that I am aware of and connect to online, plus anyone potentially on the internet looking for videos, I will filter myself accordingly. If it's a trusted friend who I've known since childhood, it's going to be very different. And if it's my husband, it's going to be very different. We have in-jokes, it's that kind of thing. But yeah, it doesn't mean it's any less authentic, because I come to this channel with my heart on my sleeve. I really do. You know, I am basically the same. People will say that to me after they get to know me. They say you basically are the same. And I think maybe that is sort of sometimes why we get these parasitic parasocial dynamics going on online as well, which I appreciate can be really tricky for certain creators, especially if things get then dangerous. For certain people, I know that that has happened, and people need to keep themselves safe. So it doesn't make anything less authentic, I don't think. But I do, of course, set up my space, but it is a real space. This is a bunch of the tools that I work with, but they are put up nicely. Over there, the desk space that is an altar space, and sometimes I share tarot decks over there. I craft oils and incenses and blends and things. I share that sometimes. If there is a coffee cup in the way, like Candy said, I will move it out the way. I put makeup on, right, mostly for my videos. I think there are a few when I don't have makeup on, but it's just like anyone would, you know. I'm not just gonna rock up with like food and toothpaste around my mouth, and it's the way you present yourself in general. It's getting dressed, and I'm wearing one of my favorite easy-going pullovers. I put on a necklace this morning, I put on my rings, I did some makeup, we went for a lovely walk, but I've got joggers on underneath. Can't see that. At the moment, I'm in the bout of this terrible lower back pain, so I'm having to do these mobility exercises every day, and so I'm not necessarily being authentic by not always telling you all those things like I'm telling you now. But over there, there's some pictures that haven't been put up, but you can't see that. Over here, like, this wardrobe was open earlier and I shut it before I filmed. I started with natural light and then the light started to dim, so I put on a light. So yes, there's a kind of staging, but it's still my authentic space and I still work in this space. It's still real, but I'm also not showing you everything. A lot of the talking heads videos are someone sitting talking about something else that's not happening in that moment. But if I'm sharing a vlog when I'm walking in the woods, that is me walking in the woods, and I'm genuinely walking in the woods. And I might film for half an hour and then walk for another half an hour and spend some time with some trees, spending time running around with my dog. It's a legitimate time that I'm practicing, but while I'm talking, I'm not exactly doing both unless I'm literally doing both and telling you.
I will also say that I don't always film when I go to the woods or when I go to walk my dog either. Mostly I don't film when I go for walks.
I don't really share spell work on my channel because it doesn't really work for me, because I think that the moment there's a camera, it's very distracting. The only time I've ever shown anything is like if I'm crafting an oil or an incense, and I will show snippets of it, but I will also not share incantations or prayers that I am performing. I might talk about what I'm doing. If I ever share photos or images of me doing a practice or a spell, for instance, it's a spell that's been cast, done, and it's worked and it's long gone. So it might be from a year ago or half a year ago, whatever. There's no harm in me sharing that. If I were to switch on a camera, it's usually at the end of the actual practice part. So it doesn't impact on the actual spell work itself. So in that way, yeah, you're not seeing the real stuff, and I don't share 95% of my practice is not shared at all. And that's partly what I was speaking to earlier about how a lot doesn't translate to camera. You can't share personal gnosis on the astral. You can't share how it feels to slip through a portal and what happens. You can't, unless you put it into words. There's so much that words just don't allow for. I think there are some books that really, they put it into words really well. They describe it really well, that there's this like indescribable nature to witchcraft, and that is the elusiveness, the mysteriousness. That is the mystery of it. That is the secret of it, and that is the beauty of it. That is the elusive, mysterious, beautiful nature of the craft. You know, I think it's so important for witches to experience their craft and their practice. Candy spoke to this, Trish Beanbag Hagbride spoke to this. It is so true that your witchcraft is lived, it's your lived experience, and there's no way that me sitting here talking to you for half an hour, or me vlogging in the woods, or me sharing a 30-second snippet of me walking through the woods is going to convey that, or even me breathing on some herbs in front of the camera for you is not going to convey the energy work, the practice, the shift, the inner shift. There's so much shadow work, there's so much inner work that goes on behind the scenes that is just not transferable at all, and I love that. I actually am really grateful it's not because it's mine, it's for me only. I think that there are questions in this hashtag that have different responses. It can definitely evoke different feelings for different people, and I think for me, I'm going to answer another question that's later on right now, the imposter syndrome one. I think for me, I was raised to be a nice girl, and it's the Eve complex, you know, it's that Eve wound, and working with Lilith for the past 2-3 years has necessitated that I examine my relationship and my connection with Eve. There was a book that I read when I was younger that was about Eve, but it was coming from a Christian perspective. I'm interested to read that again. It made me feel really seen at that time, but it was also still damaging, I think. And I do have some experiences within the church that I do want to share some of my story around religious trauma, etc. But examining my relationship to Eve, the things that have come up for me with that wound. But being a nice girl, being a people pleaser, I was always taught to be really kind to people, even if they treated you like crap. And that's really rough. So I've just had enough of it, really. I mean, I'm still going to be kind. You know, I have my morals, I have my ethics. I'm still going to be polite and friendly to people. But if anyone is rude or mean or is toxic, then I will still be pleasant in public, but I don't feel that I want to spend any of my time or energy worrying about those people. So that is my feeling now. But I've gone rambled about this because I was trying to talk about being a people pleaser. I think with being a people pleaser, you worry about what people think. And that is a massive thing about, I think, being a woman or a female kind of role. You often feel that you have to worry about the actions of others or make amendments for the actions of others, you know, make sure other people feel comfortable before yourself. And it's really damaging. And I think that I noticed when I was reading some of these prompts and listening, like I was thinking, oh, like I really hope no one thinks that about me. And then I was like, but these people don't know you. And if they think that about you, who cares? So I think that's the only thing. It's like that fear of like what other people think of you. And then I was just like, well, no one knows my practice and no one's gonna know my practice because no one's me and no one's in my home 24/7 watching me. Listening to some people talk, it has given me such a lot of relief because it is true. No one knows your practice, no one knows you, no one knows your heart. No one can point the finger and say you're not legit, you're not practicing, you're not a witch. You know, no one can say that. Don't let anybody say that to you. Your practice is legitimate. The heart of the witch is where your witchcraft is, and the way you move through the world, the way you show up, the way you give of your time, you know, the way that you care for people and who you are in the world. You will show up and you will make changes in the world according to what your intentions are, and I think that speaks volumes. So yes, for me, the shadows around Eve and wanting to please people and then knowing that I'm not necessarily going to please everybody. Some people might see me and think, God, she's annoying, or like, oh God, her setup looks so fake, or whatever they might think of me. And they can think that, that's fine. But I know my heart and I know my practice and I love it. And like I said before, I love that there are areas of my practice that don't translate because then it's mine. And it doesn't matter how big social media is, nobody can take that away. And I think that is like the most beautiful thing about witchcraft, that no one can ever take it away from you. So you do you and embrace your witchcraft.
As an addendum to the authenticity piece, I did write a note, and that was about the inner dialogue and navigating the paradox around wanting to discuss the truth around something. But it's not that then what gets shared isn't the truth, but it's more like delving into some of the sticky, muddier, more could be perceived as negative things, because I think there's a very fine line between being a positive, uplifting, kind, loving person and then also kind of then accidentally bypassing or toxic positivitying. I know some really lovely people IRL and they're not particularly spiritual or witchy, but they are good people, but they do have a proclivity towards toxic positivity. But it's just because it makes them feel comfortable in the world that they are in. And I can see that in myself. So when I see that in someone, I recognize that that is a mirror, that I am seeing that within myself as well. So I check myself on that. If I ever see something in someone and I'm like, oh, I recognize that, then I'm like, well, where is that in me? And I ask myself that. So I would say there is an inner dialogue that goes on around how much do you share around certain topics, especially if, you know, there is that point around there needing to be some layer of protection or a censorship online. It's a nuanced thing. So how to stay positive and uplifting and inspiring, because I hate that spiritual bypass. I hate toxic positivity, and I think, to be honest with you, it's probably one of the reasons why IRL, a lot of the mummy people I know don't really jive with me, because I think they probably find me a little bit too, you talk about real things too much. They just want to act like everything's rosy all the time, and that's not me. So I think it is the responsibility of each person to monitor that within themselves. And like I said, if I notice something in someone else IRL, I will check that in myself.
I had a really beautiful experience yesterday I do want to share. I went to the march. And then I went to the bookshop afterwards because I was like, I needed to be around some books. I was just looking around. I looked at the female psychology section, I looked at the philosophy section. There were a couple of young people sitting in the windowsill. It was a young woman and a young man, and as they passed, the young lady looked at the witchcraft section, which is really tiny in our local bookshop, and she was looking at some books around Wicca, and she was talking about wanting to manifest, and the young man was mentioning stuff about Harry Potter, and I was just listening and thinking like, ah, yes. You know, and I was like, oh, it's so, that first moment when you're like, oh. And she was like, oh, I'm not sure which book. And I was like, should I say anything? I was like, oh, I don't know. I was like, if I was you, I'd pick that one. And I pointed to a book by Juliet Diaz because I know I love her writing and I know I love her books. And I know I would definitely say within the witchcraft space, she shows up and she walks the walk. And so I was like, yeah, go with that. And she was like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. And she like took the book. She was so happy. And I was like, oh, I was so excited for her starting that. Wow. I'm so honored to have been able to say, that's a really good book. That was a really nice moment.
The Norse Witch made a really great point in their video that I've written a note on about not wanting to waste spell ingredients. That's a really good reason for not doing spells online as well. I use those things and they're important for me in my real magic. It's not that I think that it could take away. I think it's absolutely fine to post pictures of my altar space or a spell that's in the past. So it's an altar space image, but I've changed the altar since I took that photo. Or it's a photo of a spell that was done 6 months ago and that's completed, as I said. So for me, that's fine. And also I'm fine for other people to do whatever it is they do, but that for me works for me because then I feel safe in what I'm sharing. Also, I think it's fine if people also do a demonstration because I think that's great for learning. And I think if anyone was to do like a course or like a live course particularly, and they had like one of those overhead cameras, and when I'm sharing tarot spreads, I do a demonstration tarot reading, and I've got a number of videos on my channel where I walk through a deck and then I do a demo reading, and I set the intention for it to be a reading for the collective and who is watching, but it's still a demo reading. It's not for me. That's similar in a way. I have said this already that like, yeah, 95% of my practice is not online. I couldn't be transferable, and I really like that. But also like my witchcraft is me and my whole life, my whole existence, how I move through the world. So I could never convey that or share all of that on a video, and I wouldn't want to, but it also doesn't make me any less authentic. It's just the nature, I think, of the beast. It's the nature of what social media is and what online connection is. We are all such complex, emotional, nuanced human beings, and I don't think you can like distill that down into a 30-minute video. I would never like to think that I know someone or that I have a complete picture of who someone is or that I understand what their practice is. I would never want to presume that because they're sharing a certain aspect of themselves, and I take that for what it is and appreciate that, you know, for that sharing. The magic is definitely embodied in everything I do and how I move through the world. That's what I've written here. I think that's so key.
Do I think there is an element of censorship in online spaces? I do, and I think that it's important that there is. I don't know a lot about TikTok particularly, and I don't know a lot about algorithms, even though this is a great joke. I actually work in social media, so isn't that funny? Maybe. So yeah. Keeping it real, I have to look for those articles online that tell you about the algorithms and when they change, because I don't necessarily just know about it. I don't really know how to please an algorithm other than what I've heard people say the algorithm likes, and then it changes in 6 months. So I do think it's important in order to keep people safe, because obviously there are young people as well, and also a number of people spoke to this. There are certain things that are just not really palatable for the mass population unless you are a witch, and so I think that it's an important element. But then again, like some people did share about things like being shadow banned. I don't even really know what being shadow banned is, but I think that I have probably been shadow banned. I know that sharing content around has definitely decreased my views, and using certain hashtags around that. For me, it's really important to speak about that, so I will take that loss. I'll take it on the chin. How do I decipher what is appropriate to share online versus what to keep privately? Is this based on social media etiquette or a personal preference? I don't know about social media etiquette. I think that is probably learnt, but then again, it's probably different in different communities. And then you have things like trolls, which obviously, from hearing people speak about that, I guess is about that human idea that behind a computer no one can see you and you can say whatever you want, that kind of thing. That's obviously not an etiquette I enjoy or would ascribe to. I share what I want to share, really, and I keep private what I know I want to keep private. So I wouldn't talk to you about my underwear because it's not necessarily appropriate and it's not really relevant. I try and stick to what's relevant. I try and talk about what's appropriate, and again, like I talked about before, there is a level of having a filter for whoever you're talking about. I am technically talking to the internet, so there's a degree. I think I just lean into what I feel is appropriate and right for me, and what is the truth for me as well. Like, I just want to be authentically me, but I don't necessarily want to show up in my pajamas or in my underwear, you know what I mean?
On the censorship point as well, I wanted to say that I do feel that social media and sharing online is set up specifically in a way with the algorithms as well that does dictate and necessitate a certain way that we engage with it and also what we share. And I've heard a number of people echo this, and it's almost like the two feed into each other. So someone might have some amazing things to bring to the table and fantastic opinions and personal gnosis, but those things aren't going to get the views and those things aren't going to get necessarily pushed by the algorithm, and so they create content that is aesthetic and that will get, you know, consumed and pushed out by the algorithm. But then, you know, it can still be original, it can still be innovative and cool, but it might not be as like rich and valuable and powerful as it could be if it was like 100% authentic, if the algorithms allowed for that. But also, if they did, there wouldn't be that safety element that the censorship of community guidelines within an app provide for the wider population when they are consuming social media. And I think that if we want social media, if we're going to consume it, we have to understand that that is an aspect of it. It's just the nature of the beast, and that there is, I heard a creator mention this, there is like almost a feedback loop. I really thought that that was an excellent way of putting it. It is like the two come together and blur the lines of what we then receive and what we get. And so I know that Jasmine Ambrosia said this, it is what you make of it, what you want to get out of it and what you want to take from it. I think fact checking always, and I think understand that it's not going to be 100% authentic, concentrated opinions and experiences, because that is not translatable at all on these platforms. It's just not. And even if you were face to face with someone who was a peer of yours, who was a friend of yours, who you met through an in real life coven group meetup, and they were explaining to you in depth some personal gnosis about a download or a dream or some kind of experience that they had on the astral or meeting with a deity, you still would only get snippets of that encounter and that experience of theirs because it is inherently theirs. So even in real life, I think we are limited in terms of how much access we get to a person who is sharing information with us, and, you know, how much of that is concentrated versus distilled down. Also, then, what I'm trying to say, I think, is that the algorithms and the ways in which the platforms are set up, you know, to keep you scrolling, to keep you on the platform, do just generally emphasize this aspect of sharing information even more. And I think we need to be aware of that when we're consuming this content.
Have I ever encountered or heard of grifters in our community? Definitely yes. Do I recognise them? Yes. The ones on Instagram, yes. The ones that will copy and steal people's content and spend all this time, like they have way too much time, pretending to be certain people. And it's happened to me like a number of times. I'm like, I had like 1,000 followers on Instagram, not a lot at all. And it's like, really, you're wasting your time like copying all of my images? You really need a hobby. But yeah, these people, they do it and slide into DMs and say they've got a message from your ancestors and all that. It's baloney. In line with before we had social media, when readers would say to people, you've got a curse on you, I can remove it for however much, and da 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 da. And it's completely ridiculous. And real practitioners would never behave that way or do that. If you know someone who's got a big name in the community and you're aware of them and you speak to them and you have their correct handle and you're friends with them and they reach out to you and they want to do a tarot reading for you for free and you know them, that's fine. But mostly if anyone is reaching out to you to give you a tarot reading or to do a service for you, they're not going to be legitimate. And even if they are, like, they're going about it the wrong way, I think. A lot of grifters do it. Most people know about it as well now. And I think the one thing I would say is that if someone is prone to being conned, I will say you get the emails from your bank and now there are some really, really convincing ones, and I've never clicked on anything because I know just don't click on anything, just don't do it. But sometimes I will take a screenshot and I'll send this to my hubby and I'm like, is this legit? He's like, no, 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 no. Or like, I've received ones in the past and the tax people like saying that you owe a certain amount, and it's like, wait, I've done my taxes, da, 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 da. And it's like, no, 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 no. It's a scam. So like, I think people can be really convincing, and I think if you are someone, say, who is not particularly tech savvy, you come to social media and you're new into the community online and you don't know that there are grifters sliding into people's DMs like, oh, I had a message from your ancestors, I think you might get hooked by it. I mean, obviously people who are in the community, they know better because they do know. So I do think if you have been within these circles, within these online spheres, and you've seen this happen and you get hoodwinked by it, I do think it is about personal responsibility and just knowing who you're giving your money to, researched around what it is, whether it's a course or a reading or whatever. Do a bit of research, try and find their website, try and find who this person is, try and find some reviews. But if they slide into your DMs, just don't waste time. Thorn mentioned this about how the word grifter, they've heard it being used when people don't like other people, a way to sort of invalidate someone else's practice. I don't know much about that because I don't really hear a lot of drama and stuff. I don't really know much about it. I think if there are receipts and if people have been burnt, then sharing those is really good, so other people then don't go spending money and it's supporting someone who might have some really problematic views. Wolf Spain Witch, who I discovered through this tag and I really, really loved their VR, they actually called out a particular member in our community who has a really massive following and has some really problematic views. I appreciate being made aware of those things because I will be more cautious, but I also think that when it comes to using the term grifter or something like that to try to just sort of paint someone else as being inauthentic with no other reason to do so, if that's happening, then I don't think that's very fair. And I also think that, as I've said before, nobody knows what goes on behind closed doors in someone else's practice. No one can know that. I think that unless there are actual reasons why other people need to be concerned about that particular member of the community, or misinformation, if they are spreading misinformation, there are ways to deal with it that are behind closed doors, actually saying to them, oh, I think that this, what you've mentioned, might be misinformation because I read this, this and this and I fact checked it here. So I don't know if you knew that, but this is the source that I got it from. If that person finds that what they have been talking about is misinformation, then as Heather mentioned, then they can rock up to their channel and own that. When you know better, you do better. I think Jasmine said that as well. When you know better, you do better. And so that is something I would like to live by. So if someone comes to me and says, oh, you used that word and it's not exactly appropriate anymore because some people consider it to be a little bit offensive, I'm like, oh, okay, thank you so much for telling me. I'm glad I know that because now I won't ever use that term. That, I think, is really important. There are ways in which you can make someone aware of that without cancelling them completely. I don't think people should be cancelled for having an experience of something if it's legitimately their experience and they're not harming anyone, if they're just feeling something. Obviously, take things with a grain of salt, take what you like and leave the rest.
On the course thing and on the grifter thing, I have noticed there are a few creators within the spiritual witchcraft spaces that are very well known and received, and I've been listening to those webinar type things with them where they were marketing courses for themselves and they were actively encouraging people to go into debt to take their courses, and their courses were thousands of pounds. That feels really icky to me. So for me, that is a no-no. I don't like that. If you're encouraging someone to go into debt to take your course and promising unrealistic expectations based on like one person who took your course who had a really outstanding result, you don't know what that person had as a resource to start with, and they may have already been set up for that success and you just don't know. So I think taking those kind of manifestation courses, those manifest money courses, with a real pinch of salt, because I think that could be really dangerous. There is something IRL as well, like a pyramid scheme thing that I have experienced IRL, as well as I've seen it within the communities. So a thing where they will market a kind of business model to women to provide spiritual teachings, but the teaching itself is thousands of pounds. They encourage you to go into debt for it, and then the idea is you're worth so much money, your experience is worth so much money, and people out there will pay for that. So we're gonna charge you all this money for this course on how to build a business, and then you're gonna go and build a business that you'll then market to people for thousands of pounds, and it's icky AF to me. I don't like it. And it's a pyramid scheme. It's essentially, I'm going to take your money, give you some like peanut resources that you could find somewhere else, or you could probably get from a book, and then you're going to go and charge lots of people money to give them the same thing, or to give them something slightly different, something like more spiritually nuanced. I've seen that, and I think that's icky. I've seen that IRL, I've seen that in real life spaces, spiritual spaces, and I've seen that online. I don't like it. That's one, real hard no for me. I also think that if I ever did create a course or anything like that, that I would not feel comfortable charging that kind of amount. And obviously it's down to the individual. I think that there are courses that are worth hundreds. My astrology course was close to 1,000, but you were able to pay over time, and it was worth it for me, I feel.
I don't know of any grifters within the community other than those grifters who are on Instagram and those scammers who would have been there anyway. What tools are helpful to decipher misinformation, and how can we as a community prevent widespread information? I do think, as I said before, if there is a particular creator that is selling something that has been either stolen or has a lot of misinformation and is overpriced, or they have a problematic way of going about things, I think warning other people who might go ahead and purchase that is a good thing. But also I think if it's something that can be fixed and is not like a malicious thing that they've done, if it's just a accidental use of a phrase that they didn't know about, or if it's just a little mistake because that's what they were taught, they can be informed without cancelling. It's down to the person to think critically, to have critical thinking skills. I think one of the best things about going to university, apart from the library, because that was my favourite, I mean, no, seriously, because it was like a listed building, it was beautiful. I loved the library there. Apart from that, the best thing is being able to think critically, being able to read a paper, to understand how to break it down and interpret it, how to question it as well, and then look at the other side of it, look at the nuance. So I think it comes down to the person to educate themselves and to fact check. Fact checking always, even if it's a creator or a writer that you really, really like, I think it's important. And as I said again, when you know better, you do better. I'm always saying this, I'm a student, forever student of all of the things that I've learned and all of the things that I practice, because I'm an ever evolving human being and I am not an expert on anything. I think I would agree we use the term expert, but I don't necessarily think that it's true, because I think we're all learning and growing.
The Wolfsbane Witch made a really, really important point about misinformation and about how there are different degrees of information being correct or incorrect. I thought about the blowing out of the candle and how you're not supposed to blow out a candle, and I think that that came from some place. It's probably a Wiccan thing, right? It's not necessarily misinformation if it's discussed like from the context in which it came, so the historical context. There is obviously actual historical fact, and you can read people, Ronald Hutton, and there's amazing people within the community as well who share actual factual historical information and scholarly information. You can go to scholarly texts to read and understand this, as well as consuming more experiential, more tradition-led kind of literature as well. I wouldn't call the fact that you shouldn't blow out a candle misinformation. I'd call it a perspective, and I'd call it a particular technique or way of working from a particular tradition. It's not mine though, and I don't prescribe to it, because I feel, for me, intuitively, I'm okay with snuffing out a candle with the energy and the intention that I will be relighting that. That works for me in my practice, so that's what I go with. And again, I think it's really important for people to follow their intuition on how they work. But again, if you've got information like you shouldn't blow out your candle, I think it's probably really important that you be explaining that, framing it within the context in which it came from. And if you can give historical context and some resources around that, that's really good. I always link resources in my description boxes, so the books that I've read and recommend around the topics, where I've read about it and how I have come to practice the way I have. Definitely intuition and what the person associates with it. So if there's certain elemental classifications, for instance, for the tarot or for certain herbs, you know, there are a number of different herbalists, botanists, who've got different classifications, different planetary correspondences for different herbs, and they're perfectly legitimate within those people's framework and paradigm. And so, okay, that is that person's perspective and that's that person's perspective. It's what works for you, essentially. If you have an association with something, that's going to be more powerful than someone telling you that it has a meaning, or reading that it has a meaning in a book that you never would have put to it yourself. If you've got particular association already with something, so say there is a musky perfume that someone you didn't like used to wear, and you associate that scent with, you know, being lied to, then that is like a baneful scent to you, right? But for some other people, it could be a really sensual, beautiful scent. So that comes from within. In terms of the education factor, science, history, but science is like an ever-evolving living thing, because some things are explainable now that weren't at a certain point, that were considered kind of magical or mystical, and now explainable by science. And I'm sure there'll be more discoveries as well. It expands in its living and changing. There's a difference there with that as well, because the history, if something actually factually happened and there's like proof that it happened and it's written in all of the historical texts and it's provable, that's fact, and it's not going to change, because you can't go back in time and change that. I mean, but science is ever evolving, so that might change. And also there are different scientific researchers and experts who will say differing things. So yeah, you've got difference of opinions there. So again, framing, context is so important.
Does a large following impact the perception of a creator? I think it is human nature and instinct to kind of go, oh wow, that's a large following, they must know what they're doing. And I think that that can be the case. It might have dropped some absolute gold. I think you can spot it easily if someone is talking in absolute terms about something that they know being an absolute truth, or things like that, like their way being the only way, they've got this tradition and you can only access it by paying this, that or the other. If I ever start watching or consuming content from someone and I hear those kinds of phrases or hear that kind of rhetoric, then I don't really continue to listen or watch. So I think that's probably why I didn't think of that in the grifter section. But
one thing I would say is that I do appreciate that larger creators get a lot of criticism and a lot of nasty comments, a lot of trolling, a lot of unpleasant attention, and it can be dangerous. And I really appreciate that that's something they have to experience and go through, and I don't like that for them. I don't think that just because a creator is large, that means that they should be treated like a commodity, or that you can like rock up to their space and say to them that you want information about this, that or the other, or they've ignored you, or that kind of thing, like they owe you something. That's not right. They're human beings. They just happen to have a huge amount of people watching them, which is wonderful, but it comes with its challenges. I don't think it's fair to see them as if they're for public consumption. And you know, when you see there are massive channels and then people come to the comments and they talk about them as a subject rather than talking to the creator, I hate that. It's like you're in their space talking about them. It's so weird. I just think it icks me out.
It doesn't make them an expert, no. They might have some advanced knowledge about something, they might have some advanced experience as well about some things, and they might be very legitimate, and they also might be very, very good with a camera, very, very good at creating an aesthetic, and that's wonderful as well. I think that there's an art form to creating content for sure, and pleasing an algorithm. I can also really, really appreciate the beautiful cottage witch aesthetic. I think it's an aesthetic, it's cottagecore, it's beautiful, and I love consuming it.
In terms of that aesthetic, that woodland aesthetic, I really think it's beautiful. I struggle to do it myself because for me, I'm not a large creator and I don't have a cameraman or anything like that, so I couldn't just go ahead and do it. I would have to like take a camera with me, and I'd rather walk through the woodlands if I'm going to walk through the woodlands and talk as a vlog, or if I'm talking about a particular practice and I'm filming certain snippets, I'll go to a space, do whatever I do there, meditate or whatever, and spend time there and do my practice there. But then I might take an opportunity to switch the camera on, put it on whatever it is I'm looking at, so some plants or something, or take a photo, you know. It's not that necessarily if people do that it's not authentic. I just don't want to do it. I don't really tend to film myself connecting with plants or anything like that unless I'm filming, as I said like before, a snippet of creating a oil and I show myself holding it and imbuing intention and then not blowing into it. Other than that, I don't really share that kind of thing.
It is an art form in itself. You know what? You can get that though. That might not be 100%. You can still live that in snippets of your life. And I think that's again where we come back to that, like living your witchcraft. Trish talks about you take your witchcraft outside and you live your life. You know, you can have those little moments.
And that's not to say those moments should be recorded either, because the beautiful moments aren't captured sometimes.
I had the most beautiful morning this morning with my kids and we frolicked through a woodland together. We had those moments, but it's not right outside my door. I used to actually have a forest right outside my door, but even when I did, it wasn't like that. It was a lot of mud and accidentally sliding in dog poo and, you know, and I didn't wear pretty dresses. I wore trainers and muddy boots. But I love that too. There is a cottagecore, and I actually do love those dresses as well. I think they're really beautiful. It's beautiful, and each their own. Other assumptions as to why they have a large following. I think there's a number of reasons why, and I don't think I am qualified to sort of understand what all those reasons are either.
I think it's really likely that someone is popular for a number of reasons that are all legitimate: experience, knowledge, background, and aesthetic, and algorithm, and any number of those.
I appreciate them. So how does one maintain the balance of authenticity and content creation? I think it comes down to the individual. For me, it's just really about making the content that I would like to consume, or making the content that I would like to make, what I find fun, because I have quite a lot of different little nooks in this house now. It's really nice. Like, I have a kitchen apothecary now downstairs because I got this beautiful antique dresser, and I have a lot of my kitchen herbs down there that I create tinctures and teas and things from. Anything that's like medicinal or like edible down there, like kitchen witchery. And then other stuff is up here, so I have like 2 different apothecaries. I have like an antique cupboard in that room over there. It's the antique cupboard that I had when I was growing up, and it was my bedside table, and I had my little altar in there when it was my first altar. It is a real hot mess still. There are herbs in there that probably need to be utilized in something quick. I'm not using the space well. It's like stacked up on top of each other, all higgledy-piggledy. It really needs organizing. And I think I said when I was walking through, I am just not going to do it on camera because it's really painful to edit. So I don't want to do a video that I am not going to enjoy editing. I do like to edit out my ums, and that takes some time just because I don't like the sound of them, because I probably say quite a lot. It's nicer for me to know. I think I heard someone talking about this on YouTube when I was first like, right, I'm going to make a video, because I did have another channel as well. I talked about motherhood on my other channel, on my first channel. When I was first learning how to create videos, someone said that their client edited out all the ums and they did really well, and I was like, oh, if I edit out my ums then my videos will do well. I think I started that from the start, editing out my ums, and I just prefer it that way now. And maybe that is like a level of authenticity that people prefer to have the ums in. I definitely think that if I am feeling a moment, there's a pause, I will leave that in because it feels rich and important for the moment. I think for me, it's just about making the content that I want to make and making content that's true for me. I don't talk about something I don't know about. I don't talk about something I've not got experience of. There are a lot of things I want to make videos about, but I'm like, oh, I haven't read that one book yet on it, and that's the last book that I haven't read on it, and I want to read that book before I... A lot of reasons why I don't make videos, but like, and I have funny things about that, like I want to read all the stuff that I possibly could, and so I think that that is definitely a shadow for me. But like, I'm definitely going off topic now, but that is a shadow for me because I do feel sometimes that I never know enough in order to be legitimate or whatever. But I know that's not true, and I know that my practice is very powerful, and I know that what I do is powerful and it works for me. So I have absolute faith and belief in my own practice as it is. But I can say that with 100% authenticity, I will never come on here and talk about something I don't know about and that I haven't experienced firsthand. It's just not me. I couldn't do that. I'm very real, and I'm definitely a person. I've always had my heart on my sleeve. I Scorpio, Leo, and a Cancer. Very much truth teller. Loyal, honest. I just couldn't be any other way, really. Imposter syndrome and FOMO. When I follow other creators in the community space, does it make me feel genuinely inspired and empowered, or does it create feelings of FOMO and being less than? I definitely feel empowered and inspired by the content I choose to consume. If they brought me to a place where I was feeling like kind of low afterwards, I would not. Feelings of missing out. Sometimes I do have a thing, and I think it's a shadow thing, I have a thing where I want to be able to watch everybody's video, and so I did put pressure on myself to watch so many videos at one point. It was so much, and I just couldn't, and I had to stop. You know, there are a number of creators that I just naturally watch most of their videos because I love them, and there are a number of other creators who create several videos that I really am interested in, and I go back to those types of videos. But there are other threads of content that don't necessarily align for me, or that I don't enjoy as much, and so I don't always watch all of those. But like, I try and watch people, I try and support. Lennon mentioned that she watches people's videos and then doesn't necessarily leave a comment that they don't know that she's there, and that's often me. And I wish I could leave comments, and what I tend to do is I'll have a video going on, and what I'll do is I'll open it in another browser and then put it over to one side of my browsers, because I always have 1,000 browsers open at once. So I have like a collection of like these videos that I sort of keep over like a few days, and then I will go back when I have a chance and go back into the videos and comment on them when I have time. But I do tend to watch and then comment later. I would like to comment more on people's videos so they know I'm there, and so they know I appreciate them and I enjoy their content. Fear of missing out. I've definitely felt like, oh my gosh, that deck is so beautiful, and I would love to have that in my hands, and I wonder how it would feel, but I would never think that anyone's creating that in me. It's my desire for that beautiful art, usually. Like, the art in tarot decks is a big pull, especially for someone who is an arty type. So paint and draw. I went to drama art school, and I got into a fine art school, I got into a drama school, and I chose to go to uni. So all the arts. I have definitely had the thing of like fear of missing out of watching videos. videos, fear of missing out, of like being in a conversation, like I want to be in a conversation with people and be in the community in that way. Maybe because as well I've been burnt a lot by friendships and stuff, and people being very vocal throughout my life about not liking me, wanting to be liked, wanting to be accepted and appreciated. And sometimes I think I can maybe tell when some people don't like me, but that's also fine, and I'm learning to be okay with that.
In the fear of missing out area, I think there is a frustration as a smaller content creator that you can spend a really, really long time putting energy into creating a video, but then it doesn't get seen by the community at large. A lot of people don't see it. I think I've heard other people talking about this, then you see or hear other people talking about how no one talks about this, and you're like, I made a video about that, no one saw it. I've had this before where I've made videos and I'm about to upload it, and then a massive YouTuber uploads a video that's the same theme or same topic, and I think, well, if I upload mine now, it's literally going to look like I've just made a video after they made theirs, and that's not the case because I often film ahead. So that's happened a couple of times. I just generally, with those videos, I tended to just save them or like redo them later on, or just I would change them up and put a different spin on them than I had done in that initial video, because there are so many videos on certain topics because they're really popular, and I think it's really great for one-on-one topics to be shared, and they do really, really well. But at the same time, there's only a certain amount of things you can say about a particular practice, like a particular technique of practice that is really popular within a community, for instance. There's only so many things you can say about it. You can give more ideas about how you use it in your practice, or how you might imbue energy into it, or, you know, little things like that, little subtle nuances about how you practice with it. But the technique is the same if it's from a particular tradition, it's been taught a particular way, and it comes to a point where there's some things that I'd love to make videos about, but there's not really a point because I've got a much smaller viewership than lots of people who've already made videos about it. So I would love to make videos about those things, and maybe I will one day, but at the moment there's loads of other things that I can make videos about, so I will do that instead and just focus on what I can do.
Genuinely inspired, yes. Empowered, yes. And excited as well. If someone is talking about something in a way I've never thought about it before, I'm like, oh yes, it gets the juices going. I'm like really excited. I love that. That's exactly the kind of content I like. And I love arty content as well, gardening content, that kind of thing. Like I said, like fan content, I love all that. I love scary movies, so that's a big thing for me. Fashion, love, love, love. I'm obsessed with the Kibby body types and your style and your color system and all of that. I love listening to people talk about how they read, ways in which they read, and like how they will bring oracle with tarot and some of the spreads they do. I love those conversations. Mary Grace, I love her channel. Tarot Shrink, Krista's channel, obviously Candy. I'm talking about the people I love in tarot now. There are so many people I really, really respect and love watching their videos, and I'm gonna forget people. In the witchcraft community, maybe I see someone talk about a book and I'm like, oh, I want to read that now, or like it's not available yet, or like, oh yes, that book was on my list last year and I never read it last year and I still don't even have it. I need to buy that book. And so yes, because I want to read all the things. I had this at university where I'd like beat myself up if I read anything that wasn't a textbook for my degree, which really took the fun out of things for a while, I think. But I do this, I have to absorb knowledge, I just love that. But then I think, I've said this as well in some of my videos, I think it's really important to go slow with things. And also I noticed, my mum has said this before, she'll read like a page on like an evening when she's really tired, and then she'll get to the bottom of the page and realise that nothing's gone in, and I'm like, yeah, I do that. Because I do tend to just read in the evening because that's the time I have free. As a mum who works and has a busy life, that is the time that I have free to read. I do get that, especially if it's like a topic that is quite in-depth, and so it's really, really been important for me to allow myself breathing space in which to like absorb the knowledge and then to put it into practice as well. And not everything needs to be put into practice, you know, you don't need to do every single ritual or every single practice in every single book, but I think there are a number of books where actually there's an unfolding, and as you go with it, you flow with it, and certain elements of it can become part of your practice, and that's really incredibly beautiful. So I mean, I think Gemma Gary's work is like that for me. FOMO, I think, but in different ways, maybe, like the fear of like missing out of reading a good book that I want to read like right now because I want the knowledge, or fear of missing out on lots of people's amazing videos because they're wonderful and they make great content and I really enjoy watching them. Has it left me vulnerable, taken advantage financially? No, because I use my discernment and my critical thinking skills. I never went into debt. I had the money, but it probably shouldn't have gone on a tarot deck. Do you know what I mean? It's that kind of thing. So like I always use my discernment, my judgment, judgment. I make my call and I'm responsible for myself, and I understand that. So no, I think, like I said, it could be possible for people to be taken advantage of if they are, you know, more vulnerable to that kind of thing. Need to purchase the latest book? No, I did say there are some books, you know, I really want to read that, but like, it's only if I want to read that I will still legitimately sometimes listen to interviews about books that I don't think I'm going to read in the next year or maybe even 2 years, and I think maybe that will come into my practice later down the line, but I think that's not for me right now. I'm interested to hear in the author's perspective because I'm interested in broadening my scope, essentially. But so I don't ever feel that like need to fit in, because I know I never really fitted in before anyway. Did Candy talk about this, like, being authentically you and that beauty of you? Like, no one else has that unique you-ness of you. I love that. So you don't need to fit in necessarily. Like, I definitely don't fit in. Yeah, it's cool. When practicing my craft, do I find myself comparing what I do to what I've been seeing other people do online? No, I don't, because I think, and I've spoken to this before on my videos, I think because I didn't have social media and I wasn't exposed to that at a young age. I was exposed to just a few books and then a couple of resources online that had ritual ideas and spells and things, that there wasn't that, and I was kind of forced to be creative, because even if something had a list of ingredients or correspondences, I wouldn't necessarily have all those. When I was younger, I had 3 crystals: amethyst, rose quartz and a clear quartz. I had 2 packets of incense. I'd get a new packet every time I run out, and I'd have a few candles, and it was very minimal, and so I would use what I had. It was often, I did magic with things like a bowl of salt, some water, a pen and paper and a crystal, or some herbs from the kitchen, or I'd do kitchen witchery. I did some baking in my teens for certain rituals, that kind of thing. Like, I pared things back a lot and just used my intuition. I don't think you need a lot of bells and whistles, and I definitely came at it from an intuitive place from the get-go because I had to, and for that reason I never second guess anything I'm doing, because it comes from within as well. Even if I have external correspondences, herbs and crystals or symbolism, I will be tapping into and connecting to the spirit of those, the essence of those, and asking them to support me to augment whatever the intention is, whatever is coming from me. And I'm raising energy from the earth, most likely, to give energy to whatever it is that I'm directing my intention towards. And I did actually create a video on my channel already about how to cast a spell, and it goes into a framework that I have that I understand to be true for the ways in which I go about spell work, whether it be more formal or less formal, more informal and casual, kind of on the fly. I think a lot of times people talk about needing things to be epic and big, and you can get really, really big results with big workings, but you can get really big lasting results with small on the fly workings. I've done some really, really beautiful on the fly workings with nothing more than a leaf and a twig that I picked up from the ground, my intention, my energy, connecting to the earth, my breath, and I've had life-changing results from those things. I, hand on heart, wouldn't change that for the world. I would encourage anyone who is doubting that to really just go inward and start from within. I think reading a book like The Altar Within by Juliet Diaz, or reading Intuitive Witchcraft by Estrella Taylor, Psychic Witch, obviously, by Matt Oren, those kinds of books where you're encouraged to really get into the meat and potatoes of what it is that you do and like what your magic is, that's really where the juice is, you know, the magic. In what ways do I combat imposter syndrome? So I don't feel like an imposter other than the like reflective part of it. So like, if I have a perception that someone else doesn't like me, or someone else thinks that I'm not legitimate, but then I know that's not true and they don't know me, I don't know them, so it doesn't really matter, and I'm kind of like, oh, I don't really care. I'm too old. I'm too old to be people pleasing. Like I said, it's an Eve wound. It's a wound that I need to work through. It's as part of my shadow work, and I'm being very real about that. But it's the way I was raised. It's the nature of wanting to please people around me, and I definitely haven't ever experienced anything good out of that. I just want to be myself, really, and if somebody doesn't like me, then that's their prerogative, and I don't have the energy to care. How do I combat imposter syndrome? Just being myself. Not putting energy into worrying about what other people think, I think, is the thing. Not putting energy into worrying about it, and not putting energy into being resentful about that either. If I find out someone doesn't like me, that's fine. They can do what they do, and I don't have any ill will or bad blood towards them. They just do what they do. As long as no one's hurting me or anyone else, I don't care. So what would my practice look like without the social media influence of other creators? I think there'd probably be areas of it that I wouldn't have delved into as deeply, or maybe I wouldn't have touched on at all yet. Like, as I said, the more ceremonial paranormal content, listening to people talk on those long podcasts about grimoire texts and things, listening to people talk about thelema, for instance, that probably wouldn't have been part of my path were it not for social media. So I definitely think it's helped me to broaden my understanding of other practices that are out there apart from my own. I still think the heart of my witchdom would still be within me, and I'd still be doing probably quite a similar practice to what I'm doing. I might not have as many tarot decks or witchcraft books, to be honest with you.
I think I mentioned this, but in terms of where my practice is, I definitely think I wouldn't have been exposed to as many diverse perspectives or experiences as other creators have shared. I feel like I have a real place of privilege, and I'm really humbled to be able to witness and hear about other people's experiences and that they want to share that. Again, when you know better, you do better. So I don't think I'd be as active and know as many people online either within the LGBTQI plus community, for instance, or BIPOC communities. I feel like I am privy to some information that is really good that I wouldn't necessarily have known, and I wouldn't have been necessarily as active in terms of working for certain charitable causes or whatever.
Capitalising off community. Do I consider online communities as equally valid to in-person communities? I think they're different, and I think they are as valid as whoever it is for. Do you know what I mean? For me, I think they're just very different, and I think I get different things out of both. Like I said before, I have met some beautiful friends, and I now have a little community outside of the online sphere, but we met through this, and I never would have met them otherwise. And honestly, being with them is like being with a soul connection, and I cannot explain that, but it really is like that. And also, it's just lovely, like I said, being able to shoot the breeze, as it were, with other content creators and like share ideas and thoughts about like philosophical kind of contemplative ideas and ideologies and paradigms, you know, discussing this, that and the other with other creators. Things like coming together for a cause, really, really important and amazing, and I love that about online communities, and you can reach a lot more people. So for activism, that's really, really key and important. I love the online community for that. I think anything that's drama fueled or about hate or promoting fear amongst people, I don't like that, and I don't ever want to be that. I would never want to be someone who is not inspiring or uplifting someone. That's not my intention, and I would not want that to be the case for someone. But maybe, like I said, I know people haven't liked me in person in my life, so there probably are some people online who don't drive me, but that's also fine. I think they're different but valid. I get different things out of them. I think in-person communities are just different, and they're beautiful. So how have online occult witchcraft communities impacted me as a person and a practitioner? I think I've spoken to that quite a lot. One thing I would say is a thought that I had is that IRL communities in my area tend to be less aware of cultural appropriation, less aware of things like crystal mining, problems behind that, the ethics around taking on certain practices or beliefs, these kinds of things that are conversations within the witchcraft sphere, because there are a number of diverse people sharing online. And so I feel that I do have a real privilege to be able to hear diverse opinions, especially from people from the LGBTQI plus communities. Obviously, I am not a part of that community, and I'm an ally, supporter and friend of, but it's not my experience, so I can't speak to it. And so to have people who are willing to talk to me about it or to speak openly and share their feelings, I am really humbled to be able to receive those and witness those. And same with BIPOC communities as well, and people with different cultural backgrounds and beliefs and upbringings. I think it's really, really beautiful, and so I think it's broadened my horizons in that way, in a very ethical way, and so I understand more from that perspective than some people that I've encountered IRL who've had long-term practices within Wicca or witchcraft but haven't necessarily been exposed to other practices and cultures and paradigms online or in real life. Where I live, it's quite a rural area, and we are close to a city, about half an hour away from a city, which does have more diversity, but in this area that I'm in right now and the school that my kids go to, there's very little diversity in terms of the ethnicity of people. So people are generally white people. That is part of where I live. I feel privileged and honoured to be able to bear witness to other people's experiences, and so I think that is something to consider. What are some of the dangers of the current phenomenon of capitalising off the witchcraft community? So I think some people have spoken to this so well. Both sides have real impact and significance. Will Spainwich mentioned this, I think, compared it to the LGBTQI plus community, how there are products that are marketed to the mass that are sort of targeted to but aren't really targeted to the people within the community and that don't benefit those people. I would love to have some kind of rainbow so that I can go to Pride and support, but I only want to buy a rainbow if I'm buying it from someone who's within that community and I'm supporting them. And same with any African diasporic religion or anything like that. Like, I would want to be supporting creators within those if I was purchasing something. I actually had a conversation with an owner of a botanica in Amsterdam about this, because we don't really have any botanicas near me here in England. I visited one in Amsterdam and I had a conversation with them and I said, I would love to learn, but is it okay for me to be purchasing something like this, for instance, oil? And they educated me about a particular saint and was so generous with offering information, and that was beautiful. But that doesn't make me someone who is able to take all of those things into my practice and make them mine and then start selling a course on those things. So there are so many dangers in that way, but also at the same time, I do think that it's brought people to the community which may not have come to the community, and it might be safer for them within our community, but then at the same time, maybe not. So I think there are some good and some bad things. Lots of other people have talked about the dangers. I think the main one that stuck out for me was that one about how massive companies are capitalising off of a community and not giving back to that community. And I think it's really important, if you're going to be part of a community, to be part of it. And I think somebody confirmed, I can't remember who confirmed it, someone confirmed that Mary Silver is in fact an AI technology, and that is just, oh, it's gross to me. It really is. That is just really horrid. And the fact that, yeah, some people might be coming to the craft and then going on Amazon to look for a book because they don't have any witchcraft shops or bookshops which stock anything near them, and they might be tempted to buy something on Amazon because it's on the top seller list, but it then just happens to be one of those AI generated books. It's just awful. I don't like that.
With the capitalism, commercialism thing, I love witchy stuff, but it's not necessary for me to have all the witchy things, but I do like it. But I don't think it makes you any less of a witch if you don't have all of that. It's the same with your aesthetic and how you dress. I don't wake up in the morning and think, oh, I need to wear the most witchy thing I've got. I don't do that. I just dress for my comfort. And like I talked about before, I'm really into fashion and style, especially style for your body type and that works for you. And I've just discovered this amazing channel called Style by Rita, and they have some fabulous theories and like a style key, and you can type yourself, and it's more about how you want to experience your clothes, whether you come at it from like an external perspective or an internal perspective, and how it makes you feel. And then there are different archetypes within that. It's really cool. I'll link her stuff below because it's so cool.
Have I personally been affected by this, or have I witnessed someone else? I've witnessed other people being affected by this. Yeah, I guess I'm experiencing that, but I'm within the community, and so I will take that on board. Should there be paywalled communities and online courses? Yes. Yes, I think there should. And I think it's down to the individual creator. I have taken courses in astrology. I was invited to a course by a friend, which was more of a like sharing space, and it was really beautiful. And there were journeys and things. I also work for the Holy Witch, which used to be the Witch's Box. That is primarily retreats and courses now. And that is coming from someone who has very many years of experience and understanding and has been part of certain traditions. And so I feel that those are legitimate because I've experienced them and I know that they are worth that. But if people don't have the money for it and they don't want to spend the money on it, that's also fine. And it's down to the individual to decide what is right for them to spend their money on. I'm really glad there are those things out there for people.
I also took an in-person Reiki 1 and Reiki 2, which I absolutely loved. Last November, I also attended a shamanic healing retreat with a friend of mine in Glastonbury.
I would like to purchase a herbalism course. I think skills like that are really, really great, and I'm glad that they're available. The astrology course I signed up for was amazing, and I'm so grateful for it. I also think that things like Patreon are valuable because it creates space where you can share things that aren't necessarily suitable for an algorithm and aren't necessarily going to be safe to put out there to everyone, to the wider public, and also to make sure that the people within that community are also safe from any trolls or anything like that if it's controversial. That's really, really valuable. People want to spend that money on that, that's perfectly fine. And also I think if people have knowledge and experience and they want to share it and they've put it into a course, they've worked hard for it, I think that's really valuable. I think they should do that. But also at the same time, I don't don't think that reading a couple of books on witchcraft or tarot and then crafting a course out of it after studying for like a couple of months is very ethical. You know, after years and years of experience, I'm still like over here like, I haven't read enough books on that to talk about it on my free YouTube channel. I feel like it's a privilege to be here, and I'm really happy to be here. And I often think, oh, I should make a video and put it on Patreon, and then I think, well, I have some really, really beautiful supporters on there who are basically thanking me for what I've offered for free. I did do a forecast for a really, really long time for the new and full moons, and it got really too big because I was trying to go into so much depth around all of the different things that were going on, and I would go into a lot of shadow work, and then there was terror spread, and it just got a lot, and it took such a long time to write those. It was literally like being back at university. I was writing for such a long time, and it just became too much, so I had to stop doing that. I'm really grateful to the people who would like to come on and support me for however long they want to, and I'm also really grateful for the people who watch on here and subscribe and like and share, and that's really valuable too. I think I'll create a video on there, but then only a few people will see it, and I think that everyone should get access to that information because that's the kind of channel I have. But also at the same time, I completely respect if someone wants to paywall that too. It's completely down to the creator. If they are legitimately walking their talk, that is their practice. If they are real in what they're saying and they're doing, and this is a genuine practice and their genuine experience, and you know, they want to do it that way, then that's perfectly fine. And it's also down to the individual if they want to spend their money on it.
I think in terms of courses, the appeal probably for a lot of people, especially like people coming into communities, is that like concentration of information in a very, very short amount of time. And it's almost like having 10 or 20 years worth of experience and having read a number of books. It's like that, but like concentrated down into a course of 3 or 6 months or a year or whatever, and then you get that information. Or you have like a drip, drip, drip subscription service, which, you know, if that is how you want to learn, that's perfectly valid. And like I said before, if someone has the expertise and the knowledge and the wisdom, and they're not encouraging you to go into debt and charging you thousands for it, I think that's okay. But there's a line where it gets crossed. But also, again, it's down to the consumer. I will also add to that as well that it is the practice of it that's going to make you a practitioner. No amount of courses or reading of books is going to make you a practitioner. You're a practitioner because you practice magic and witchcraft, and whether that's just in your mind with your energy or whether that's with other additional tools. I will say for the spending money part, I think it's really beautiful to support creators within the community, especially creators who you really enjoy their work. I've purchased things from a number of creators who I really respect and love, and I've enjoyed their content over the years. And even if sometimes their content has changed or morphed, there is a number of people I can think of whose channels I don't see come up anymore. I don't think they're creating content anymore, but I have supported them, and that means the world to me because I still love those items, or I love the experience of whatever it was, and so that means so much to me to be able to support people within the community like that.
I just want to ensure the authenticity of courses, workshops, memberships as financial investment. If you're in the community, ask. If you know someone who's taken something, ask them and do your research. I think there are a few people who write books who are legitimate people, but they don't have a presence at all, and they don't communicate. They're not part of the community, or they're not part of an in-person community. I think it's important to be part of your community in some way, shape or form, whether that's you have an in-person community, you have an in-person coven, or you have an in-person coven and an online presence, or you have a website and you have a way that you communicate with people, even if it's in that way. You know, you don't have to have TikTok or YouTube or Instagram even. It's just having a presence and being part of things and giving back in that way. I think it's kind of important if you're asking for money from people. And actually in the last few days, I've even seen on Instagram ads come up for a person I've never heard of. I searched for them, couldn't find their website, but there's an ad and they're selling a witchcraft course for £150. It's supposed to teach you everything about witchcraft. Never heard of them. They don't have any books. I have no idea who this person is. And then another one from someone who apparently has been seen on the BBC, and I've never heard of them, but they're selling a tarot course. I mean, maybe they're very popular in the magazines. You know how sometimes the magazines will share pop astrology and stuff, and that's really valuable. Those people often have really big followers, and they are often really, really great practitioners as well, and people within the community. But there are some people, I think, who aren't part of the community and do try to offer, and I don't necessarily think that that's very ethical. But again, people should just make their own judgments and spend what they want. But I think if you spend money on a course and it wasn't exactly what you think, I think leaving a review, and if you've got fair feedback, if you're paying for something, then you should be able to leave feedback and constructive criticism. I think that that is important. What are some topics of conversation I'd like to see more of? I would love to see more people sharing what they love and what they enjoy and what speaks to them. And I actually really enjoy vloggy videos where people are doing other things, not just witchcraft, where they actually share their lives. I really enjoy that. So I'd like to see more of that. I think, like I said, with tarot, I really like hearing people talk about how they work with the tarot and experiences. I would love to see more personal gnosis as well. And that, I think, is becoming a bigger thing. People are like sharing more and more, and I love that. So what are my community needs? I think I've spoken to a lot of that. My needs really are mutual respect in a nutshell.
One thing I've written here that I think really comes into needs of the community is that I think that supporting the voices of legitimate creators and practitioners is really important, and I think that those people should be uplifted. I really think there's so much value and gold in some of those smaller channels. I feel like they might not be the most beautifully produced videos, but they are some incredible practitioners with such a wealth of knowledge and information, and often the algorithm doesn't show them like it shows some of the bigger creators. And I think I just feel grateful that I found them and that they're on my feed because I get to watch them. But I will share those voices and uplift those voices as much as I can if it's relevant to the video that I'm filming, because I really think it's important to share those people because they are putting in time and effort and energy, and they actually have so much experience and knowledge and a wealth of wisdom. They don't necessarily have bells and whistles, but they do have such gold content.
Where would I like to be held and supportive? I think that sometimes it might be the algorithm, but you might create a video that you put your heart and soul into, but it doesn't get views and the engagement. I think I would love to have more engagement, but I also recognise there was a point where I completely burnt out a few years ago and I couldn't answer a lot of comments, and so I think that probably is why. And I noticed as my channel grew, not that I'm very large, but I had more engagement at the start than I do now, and I think maybe it's because I do talk about more things now, and that could be part of it. But also people just might not watch me anymore. But I would love to create more conversation within the community of people who watch me. Generally, I don't think that comes into support. I think I just would like to see mutual respect for other creators generally, and that doesn't mean I'm not seeing it. I am seeing it, just where there's drama or a discord or unnecessary hostility, that kind of thing. I don't like that. I don't think that's nice or productive, or bullying, you know, within this space isn't kind. Just being kind to people. Kindness is king. So mutual respect and kindness. Where do I feel like I'm not really being seen? That's what I just spoke to. I feel like sometimes you create content that's really true to your heart and authentic, and you just put your heart and soul into it, and then it just doesn't go anywhere and doesn't seem to land for anyone, and that can be a bit like, oh, okay. But it's all good. You know, you put yourself out there, so there are always going to be people who don't like it or who do like it, or there's always going to be some people who criticize as well, and that's just the nature of putting yourself out there into the world. How can we help each other in removing the external peer pressure and grow as a community? There's always going to be differences in opinion. Some people are going to be triggered by that, and one of the most important things about this tag, I think, is that we all need to do our shadow work, we all need to do our inner work, and I'm always banging on about that, but a lot of that comes into this topic because I've brought up some of my shadows within this that I feel do niggle at me, like wanting to be able to be there to watch everyone's video, or definitely wanting to absorb as much knowledge as I can, and then being frustrated with myself because I can't remember. I don't have like photographic memory. How can we help each other? I think just being authentic and being kind, showing up with good intentions for other people. You know, we don't have to be best friends with other people, but we can have good intentions for other people. Being kind, remembering that people are nuanced beings, take responsibility for yourself, be kind and respectful to other people, and that's my community needs. And I think if we all were able to do our shadow work and really look at what's going on for us and hold up that mirror for ourselves, then that would probably remove quite a lot of the issues. The external peer pressure, I'm not sure. I think that is down to the individual. Growing as a community, being honest and open as much as we can without being judgmental or like rocking up into someone's comments and just leaving a bunch of like criticism that they didn't ask for necessarily, unless it's like helpful. You know, I will take on board constructive criticism to a degree, but if it's delivered in an unfriendly manner, I'm not particularly enamored to that. People need to be friendly. There are ways to deliver things, but there are also certain things that I'm really grateful people have alerted me to. On Instagram, for instance, I love those lovely fonts. A couple of people said to me that they find them really difficult to read, and that's really, really important to mention. I actually said, you know, that's really, really helpful to know, and so I will just not use those anymore. If I do, it's just for a title, and then the rest is just normal text. How can we as a community come together more with constructive criticism without seeming shady or passive aggressive? Lots of people said this, don't be passive aggressive, just don't be. How can we as a community do better when we receive criticism and feedback? Like I said, I am very grateful for people alerting me to things that I have not known necessarily. I don't want people to be rude, nobody wants that. Be polite. If you do have some constructive criticism, unless it's something to do with like a font or a word, it's probably better to do it over a direct message so that they don't feel so called out in public. Just do your best, really. Be respectful and kind. Who are some community members? I've mentioned tons throughout, so those, a load of others, it would be too long to list, but there is a video on my channel I think where I mention them and shout them out. I love them. You can find those videos on my channel. Any further thoughts, comments? Definitely the shadow work piece is so important. Shadow work, shadow work, shadow work. That's a massive thing for me to do, and my life improves more and more the more of that shadow work I do, and my inner work grows and grows with the shadow work in a beautiful and expansive way.
So I think this is really interesting for this topic because now you're seeing like a different angle of the room. Basically, my camera has 2 battery packs and they're both done now. So I had to move over here. So I'm sitting at my little desk where I make my oils. I've got my light here and I've got my phone, and so authenticity, I'm telling you. But no, so there were a few other things I wanted to add to my VR that I had written points about, but I hadn't necessarily shared throughout when the questions were, because I'm just not organized today in my brain apparently. So I'm going to go to my notes. I do think within online spaces there has become like a trend of cancelling people, and I think that where it's necessary, where it's about hate and injustice and inequality, racism, all of these horrid things, that, okay, fair enough. But I don't believe that somebody should be cancelled for making mistakes or for like saying something when they were really young that they didn't necessarily know better about. You know, I think it's really important to give people a bit of grace because most people are trying their best. I think most people are trying to be good people. There's understanding of nuance and development. Someone mentioned this within a VR that like when you watch a video, it's like happening, you're watching it in real time, but the person might have made it 6 months ago and they might have different opinions. You know, I was listening to Devon Hunter speak about this, about books, you know, that they've written and like how they would change it, how it's not the same for them as it was when they wrote it. And I think that that's really valuable. People change, opinions change, but not necessarily even drastically. It's just a nuance of something or an addition of something. And it's really important to leave space for that as well as an interpretation and an understanding. There's nuance to it and development. I do think it's important to be understanding that we are human beings and we're nuanced, and you know, we might share a perspective from where we're coming from in a 45-minute video, but we can't necessarily be expected to account for how other people are going to understand that or take that on board or perceive it, interpret it. And there shouldn't be so much shaming and blaming and cancellation, I think, that goes on. I think people are very, very quick to point the finger. I think when it's necessary to do so or call people out, I think that that's important and we should do so to keep people safe. But I don't think it's important to cancel someone just because you don't like them or because they said something that, you know, now they know better about, things like that. There should be definitely room for mistakes and there should be room for diverse interpretations and understandings of sentiments or statements and feelings, especially because we are made up of a community with a number of diverse backgrounds, a number of different mental health challenges, as well as like a mixed spectrum of neurodiversity. And I think it's really important to have that kind of grace, give people grace and a little bit of space to breathe and develop and learn and grow and do better, but not villainize them if there were mistakes made. We can all do better, we can all own up to our mistakes, and we've all made them, that none of us are perfect. I think it's really important to do that, and it comes back to the shadow work.
I have a thought as well that witchcraft, if you're practicing it and you have some kind of spiritual practice or you're engaging with a witchcraft practice, that it really needs to be bettering you and your life and the world around you. And if it's not improving your life, or if you're finding yourself feeling or receiving feedback that you're becoming someone less positive and less uplifting than you were before. Not in a shadow work kind of way. What I mean is if your behavior is becoming more toxic, not less toxic. You know, if you're healing stuff and you're going through a bit of a rough time healing and such, that I understand. But if it's not kind of a gradual progression towards a steady improvement in who you are, how you show up, the way that you engage with yourself and the world, the way you treat yourself and others in the world, then I think that there's something there that needs taking a look at. I think witchcraft and spiritual practices should be changing you and the world around you for the better. That, I think, is really important.
I think I've finally come to the end. I've filmed for hours and I hope I can edit this down into something that's somehow consumable. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate this tag. Thank you so much to Joanna at Polish Folk Witch. Thank you to Ella Harrison, and thank you so much to Leah, the Redheaded Witch. This has been really great to reflect on. I have really enjoyed listening to other people's perspectives, and I think it's a really important topic of conversation, and I think it's important that we have these conversations and feel safe to speak about these things as well. So thank you for listening. Thank you for witnessing me. I hope that some of this landed, and if you would like to see more from me, subscribe, click the like button, share it if you enjoyed it, all of that stuff. My Instagram, my Patreon, etc. are below if you'd like to support. I hope that you have a really beautiful rest of your day. Stay safe and well, and I look forward to seeing you again in another video soon. Many blessings. Bye.